Hey kids, are you ready to kick ass and take names? Well, put your stomping boots on, because it's Mjolnir Monday, June 24th. I'm your host, Sexy Thor, and it's time for your weekly thunder. So to start off with news from our podcast family, History Comic Books podcast released a new sort of mini review episode on the Batman War on Crime story, and he also gave us a special shout after we started this whole segment about telling you what's new going on with our little pod family. And then on Facebook, he pointed out that he said that Thunder Talk's going to have a new episode coming soon, so he's putting that fire to our pants. But more on that in a sec. Coming soon, should be sometime this week, the next Nerd Bliss podcast episode will be released, and it'll be their interview with Mark McRae, who's the senior manager of programming operations at Adult Swim. Yes, that Adult Swim. So, if there's something that you really like about Adult Swim and how they do things, well, you have this guy to thank. And if there's a gripe that you have, well, it's not his fault. And that's the word from Sexy Thor. He's also the author, wow, I didn't realize it was that hard to say it, of the book The Best Saturdays of Our Lives, which is, as far as I know so far, it's a sort of book from his perspective about Saturday morning cartoons and everything. Maybe I'll get a chance to read it and let you know how it is. I'm sure Lightning Lad will let me borrow it as soon as I stop forgetting to let him borrow Aquaman and Into the Spider-Verse. One of these days. I swear, I'm trying to remember, but anyway. And also, this past Saturday, Enough with the BS podcast had another Facebook Live episode talking more about the draft and Anthony Davis and free agency and just literally everything that's happened with basketball over the last couple weeks. So, should definitely check that out. And speaking of which, Thunder Talk. Well, we'll get to the basketball part later. But this time, Thunder Talk. Wheatley put our feet to the fire about getting a new episode out soon, telling us to not make a liar out of him. And by the time you listen to this here on Mjolnir Monday or later, there should be a new episode out. I'm not going to lie, I'm recording this part of the segment that doesn't have to do with Stomping Grounds, like Saturday afternoon, because Stomping Grounds is Sunday night, and I try really hard to get Weekly Thunder out by Monday morning, sometimes like literally at midnight Eastern time. So sometimes Weekly Thunder comes out on a Sunday if you're like in Beth and Kavika's time zone or earlier. So, yeah. And also I have to be at work at 8:30 the next day. So, yeah. My little free time span is getting a little tight. And it got a little tighter because found out that after Stomping Grounds, the WWE Network will be showing their new episode from their 365 documentary series, which chronicles a particular year, or I guess the most recent year, in the life of the featured superstar. And this one is drum roll, please. The one thing I love as much as I love Thunder Talk and my cat Selena and Roman Reigns, Alexa Bliss. We get to follow along with her journey in this episode, where she goes from being Raw Women's Champion to receiving like 48,000 concussions from Ronda Rousey throughout the year, to her eventual recovery and her getting back into the SmackDown Women's title picture, even though she's a Raw superstar, but, beating a dead horse, griping and pointing out the little weirdness of this whole wild card rule. So yeah, pretty much my Sunday's full. If you need me Sunday night, well, don't. Because I'll be getting home and then watching Stomping Grounds kick off, and then watching Stomping Grounds, and then watching the 365 episode. Well, no, I'll be watching the Stomping Grounds kickoff, Stomping Grounds, recording the Stomping Grounds part of Weekly Thunder real quick, and then putting that here on the interwebs. if it's midnight or later my time, which it probably will be at that point. And then I'll be watching the 365 episode. So, yeah, super busy. Leave a voicemail with Lightning Lad or something. Anywho, the NBA draft, that whole thing happened Thursday night. And, of course, obviously, number one was Zion Williamson, the Duke player who came from high school in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which, if you haven't noticed by now, upstate of South Carolina is pretty much where the vast majority of our podcast family is from and currently living in. But even closer than Spartanburg, and I say this because I'm from a little town named Simpsonville, closer than in Greenville proper, the Brooklyn Nets drafted a center named Nicholas Claxton, who played center for the University of Georgia. And if there's one thing I love in college sports, it's University of North Carolina and the University of Georgia. You got to have an ACC and SEC team to maintain that inner balance, I guess. And Nicholas Claxton is a center from the University of Georgia who is from Greenville, South Carolina. So, yeah, we've got Spartanburg going number one, and Claxton went top of... Where did he go? I don't know. If I was a responsible journalist, I'd tell you exactly, but I don't know. The feedback as far as Thunder Talk content is that sports is kind of like lowest on people's priorities, so not really important. Also, R.J. Barrett, the other wonderful Duke player this last year, went to the New York Knicks, and Cam Reddish went to the Atlanta Hawks. And if there's one thing I love in basketball, it's the Atlanta Hawks and the Los Angeles Lakers, which makes my fandom for DeAndre Hunter, the University of Virginia player, who is like the hero of the national championship pretty much after sitting out the previous year with injury. Because if you remember, Virginia back in the 2018 tournament, he was injured, and then Virginia lost to a 16 seed. Yeah. And then the next year, Virginia came back and won the whole damn thing. And DeAndre Hunter was a big part of it. So he was drafted by the Lakers, who had traded the number 4 pick to the Pelicans from the previous weekend during the whole Anthony Davis trade. And then New Orleans did a trade with the Hawks, and the Hawks got the number 4 pick. But see, the thing is, after a certain point, it doesn't get finalized. The original team still drafts, and then when the trade goes through after like July 6th, the draft rights to that person get traded over, so that person goes to that team after like July, officially. Yeah, it's weird. That was actually famously done last year, during last year's draft, when the Hawks drafted Luka Doncic and the Mavericks drafted Trae Young, and the team had the draft rights to the other dude. So, of course, the Hawks have Trae Young and the Mavericks have Luka Doncic, and as the story told, so far in their rookie years, it famously worked out well for both of them. Which is great, because it was pretty cool being at State Farm Arena back in February and looking up and seeing that big old Trae Young sort of billboard inside. It's just like, hot damn. Okay, so enough of that basketball stuff. Especially talking about trade rights. It's confusing. Sort of. So within the comic book world, we got a couple things from that. It was announced after a little countdown, which people thought either there was going to be, strangely, a Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4 still, or there was going to be a Spider-Man Fantastic Four crossover, which would be pretty dope. It was just literally just a countdown to J.J. Abrams and his son Henry announcing to the world that they will be the writers of the new Spider-Man miniseries, working with artist Sarah Pichelli. and it's coming this September. And I don't know if, from what I could see in the Nerdist tagline, there was some sort of backlash to that, either negative reaction or whatever. See, again, if I was a responsible journalist, I would have looked this up and told you exactly what was up. However, I ask you to please not make me dive into the venom and nastiness of those particular corners of the internet, for the love of God, because the internet's full of information and it's also full of poison. These are facts. But yeah, I myself personally am very curious to check out this new Spider-Man miniseries by JJ and Henry Abrams myself. I mean, come on. JJ has racked up enough geek cred that we should give a Spider-Man miniseries a chance, right? Let us know. You know where to find us on the socials. Yeah, especially you. Also, on June 28th, because I guess there's really nothing else coming out, maybe, until Spider-Man Far From Home, but a few days before that, because, yeah, that's literally like, what, 4 days? 5 days, depending if you count days weird. Avengers Endgame will be re-releasing in theaters, except with the theaters in my neck of the woods. I mean, Endgame is still there. I can imagine Endgame is still there in a shitload of movie theaters, unless you're like a fourplex. And even then, you should still have like a space saved for Endgame showings from now until the end of time, because it's that amazing a movie. But there's going to be a re-release of Endgame where there's extra stuff, new footage, extra footage, and all that. Except it's not going to be integrated like some sort of Lord of the Rings extended edition. It's just going to be all after the credits. Because it's about to be really pointless to have a Spider-Man Far From Home trailer at the end of Endgame when Far From Home comes out in little over a week. And those are just facts. And yeah, so it's going to be all at the very end. I'm very interested in seeing. See, I know I can just watch it all separately without having to go watch through the whole damn movie, but it's also just but are you really going to pass a chance to watch Endgame again? I mean, really. What about you? Are you going to watch Endgame again? In their final attempts to finally beat all of Avatar's records? Well, you should. So Firefly Funhouse, because we're making that a permanent segment here, was pretty much Bray Wyatt watering his plants and his weird little window plants and talking about how, your mind is like a garden and it needs to grow and everything. And then, weird shots with the Fiend. And then you see all of the little characters of Firefly Funhouse, Abby the Witch, Ramblin' Rabbit, Mercy the Buzzard, Muskus the Pig. I think that's his name, Muskus? I don't know. And then Vince McMahon with devil horns, all just looking at us and saying, join us, join us. And also some weird cuts. Apparently there's a few different covers of the Muscle Man dance from a couple episodes back. A rock version, a pop version, a dance version, something like that. There were clips of that playing during the freaky montage. And so it looks like Firefly Funhouse is ramping up for The Fiend to make his in-ring appearance really soon, which I'm both really excited and afraid about, because this segment has just been fucking gold since the beginning. Has not let me down yet. And another segment before we get on to Stomping Grounds is the 24/7 Championship. Because ever since they introduced that, it's been really hairy at first, in that it's just I can't tell if this is going to be stupid or fantastic. But ever since R-Truth got his hands on the belt, and they've also been making actually been making videos for the website and the YouTube channel about the 24/7 championship, like really throwing home the point that this shit doesn't get only defended during Raw and SmackDown or NXT or whatever. Like, this is 24/7, and they've been releasing videos of R-Truth losing his belt, defending his belt, regaining his belt, and yeah, it's just been a whole saga centered around R-Truth, as it should be, because he's amazing. Well, lately, I think it was Tuesday, R-Truth was on SmackDown, and he was making a clean getaway, or so he thought, because as he was getting to his limo, or his SUV, a ref came out of the car, and he was just like, what? And then turns out Carmella, who is like a foot shorter than she normally is, turned out to be 205 Live general manager and Authors of Pain manager, Drake Maverick in disguise, and he took off his Carmella wig and he rolled up R-Truth, got the 3 count, and got the 24/7 belt, and then drove off in the SUV, and was set to get married with his 24/7 belt this weekend, which he did. And then as soon as the ceremony was over and Drake and his wife were walking back down the aisle, R-Truth rolled up on him and got his belt back at his wedding. And I think R-Truth was like hiding in his wife's dress, which raises a whole bunch of other questions. But yeah, that's the latest in the 24/7 belt saga. Stay tuned next week for more Firefly Funhouse and 24/7 belt fun. And now throw it over to the Adam Wetston of like a day and a half from now, here to tell us what happened in WWE's newest pay-per-view, Stomping Grounds. Adam, tell us how Alexa Bliss won that SmackDown Women's Championship. Thank you, Saturday Thor, and actually, sadly, Alexa did not win the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bayley actually retained. So thanks a lot, you jinxing son of a bitch. And also, this week's Nerd Bliss dropped in your day, later on in your day, Saturday Sexy Thor. And it's actually their interview with a friend they made from Trekland, Tashika Gibson, not James McRae. That'll be later. So, oh yeah, and you've been spelling Kawhi wrong too, you Saturday Sexy Thor. You frustrate me sometimes, but you know what? Comfort is the enemy of progress, and I am the progression of you. So anyway, we're going to rattle off all these results here, but I want to talk about the main event quite a bit because it was an amazing main event, but the rest of the matches I can just kind of breeze through because I really want to send this off to Lightning Lad so he can finish that new Thunder Talk episode coming soon. And so I can watch the WWE 365 episode of Alexa Bliss. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a fan. So anyway, in the kickoff show, Drew Gulak defeated Tony Nese, who is the previous Cruiserweight champion, and Akira Tozawa. Now he is the new Cruiserweight champion on 205 Live. Becky Lynch defeated Lacey Evans, start with the Raw Women's Championship, and I want you to remember that result right now for when I talk about the main event, because it only gets better from there. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn defeated Big E and Xavier Woods. Ricochet defeated Samoa Joe, and he won the United States Championship, so apparently any reports and speculation about Ricochet just falling down the mid-low card and getting buried and forgotten about has been highly exaggerated. The SmackDown Tag Team Champions, Daniel Bryan and Rowan, defeated Heavy Machinery to retain. Bayley probably cheated somehow. Roman defeated Drew McIntyre and Shane McMahon for what was said to be the final chapter in that whole saga, but of course they can't let shit go. So Shane announced that tomorrow night, or I guess tonight, on Raw, Roman will be facing Drew and Shane in a 2-on-1 handicap match, even though that's pretty much literally what he did at Stomping Grounds and like Super Showdown in the last few times, but I digress. I guess eventually this storyline will probably end by like SummerSlam when Roman becomes WWE champion after Shane probably beats Kofi, maybe? I don't know. But right. But speaking of the present, Kofi Kingston, your WWE World Heavyweight Champion, baby! He defeated Dolph Ziggler by leaping out of the steel cage door, because that's one of the ways to win in a steel cage match, is just either climb over and both feet land on the floor outside, or the ref just opens the door for you and you can get on through as long as both feet land on the floor and your opponent doesn't stop you. But Dolph was inches away from getting out and getting onto the floor, and Kofi was even like a few feet away from him, all knocked out. And then Kofi came to, and he just took that leap of faith through the top and middle ropes, and is still your WWE World Heavyweight Champion. I love doing that, in case you haven't noticed. And the main event was Seth Rollins versus Baron Corbin again for the Universal Championship. You know, there was an awful lot of rematches in this pay-per-view. It's almost as if maybe this pay-per-view should be called Payback or something. Just going to leave that for you there, Mr. Rhodes. So yeah, they faced each other again, and Corbin was whining because he said the incompetent ref was the reason why he lost at Super Showdown, so he got to pick his special guest referee, and he chose everybody from like Elias to EC3 to, you know, asking Eric Young of Sanity, formerly of Sanity, to ref, and literally anybody he asked, anybody that tried to put on the stripes, Seth Rollins came at them with a steel cage, or not a steel cage, steel chair, same thing. So Corbin wouldn't announce it until the match, obviously. And Seth came out, you know, still dressed up like he's getting ready to go into the quantum realm, and holding up that steel chair as if it's like some sort of magic hammer made in the heart of a dying star. I mean, I don't know where he'd get that idea. I don't know where I'd get that idea. I don't know how you'd get that idea, but good thinking, Thunder Faithful. And he revealed his guest ref to be Lacey Evans. Now, I'm telling you to remember the first match of Stomping Grounds, because Lacey was pretty much doing exactly what a heel ref would do, you know, doing slower counts for when Seth was pinning and trying to speed it up when Corbin was getting the pin. She also turned it into no count outs and then no disqualification match, you know, much like Corbin did when he was acting general manager and just beating the shit out of everybody. And, you know, Seth, of course, wouldn't hit her because obvious reasons, but Lacey got a little high up in there, and she, you know, slapped Seth a couple times, and then he turned around and was just going to ignore her and was just going to beat the holy hell out of Corbin, and she straight up hit him below the belt from behind. Like, she stuck her arm, you know, through with Seth's back to her. Imagine this. She stuck her arm right in between his legs and went whap-pow. So, yeah, that was kind of the final straw, even though the audience had been chanting Becky literally the whole match. That's finally when Becky came out and started beating the shit out of Lacey. It's no disqualification, so, I mean, nobody's going to end the match. And then Becky finally got Lacey in a Bexploder and got her down, and then actual refs came out, and then one of the refs came to, you know, do proper reffing of the Rollins-Corbin match. And of course it was John Cone, the guy who Corbin blames for Corbin losing at Super Showdown. So Seth got him with a good old stomp with the Stomping Grounds. And 1, 2, 3. And Seth retains the Universal Championship. And there was just a nice, long, awesome moment with him and Becky just standing in the ring, sitting ringside, hanging out, walking up to the ramp like goals. So yeah, Pretty decent pay-per-view. Had an amazing ending. Brock Lesnar didn't come out. There you go. Thank you for listening. I'm going to go watch this 365 Alexa Bliss episode right now. And, of course, as always, I'm your host, Sexy Thor, and this has been your weekly Thunder of Bliss.